All right. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome, IODA members, esteemed speakers, the board members. Welcome to this year's IODA Africa webinar. My name is Bezawit Teferi Tsegaye. I'm an orthopedic trauma surgeon and a fellow in sports medicine and arthroscopy. I am also the current African regional representative for IODA. I'm very delighted to be your host. Today, we're gathered here to explore a topic that's constantly relevant and constantly urgent. We're going to discuss about how we can advance surgical training across the continent despite our resource limitations. And we're going to talk about the place of innovation in achieving this goal. Today, we have an outstanding lineup of speakers who have made remarkable contributions to orthopedic training, research, and innovation. As you all know, one of the greatest challenges in advancing surgical training is the very limited number of trained surgeons, especially relative to the population to our continent. So today we have leaders, researchers, advocates, and their work reflects not only their expertise, but also their commitment to improving the surgical care. So I'm very delighted to have you all. We also encourage you all to be an active part of this conversation. Feel free to write your questions in the chat box throughout the session. We'll have 5 minutes to address them after each presenter, but also at the end with the dedicated Q&A session. So we'll have 20 minutes of the Q&A. So feel free to write all your questions. Without further delay, I'll proceed with introducing our first speaker. So our first speaker would be Dr. Mutaleeb Ayodele Shobode. He's a board-certified spine surgeon, orthopedic spine surgeon with advanced fellowship training in complex spine deformities. He specializes in managing challenging spinal conditions both in adults and pediatrics population. His interest is spanning multiple fields in complex deformities, degenerative conditions, trauma, tumors, infection, and also minimally invasive reconstruction. His clinical expertise emphasizes precision, multidisciplinary collaboration, and optimal long-term outcomes. He completed his medical degree from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria and proceeded to get his Master of Surgery in Trauma and Orthopedics from the University of Edinburgh. His extensive training background in orthopedic spine includes the AO Global Spine Diploma, a Complex Deformity Fellowship from Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, Twin Cities Spine Center in Minnesota, and FOCOS Orthopedic Hospital from Ghana, Pantang, and also Midi Jabil Hospital from Turkey. He is a fellow of the Western African College of Surgeons and also American College of Surgeons. The floor is yours, Dr. Shobode. You can start sharing your screen right now.
You can see my screen, right?
We can, yes.
Okay,
Good,
good.
good.
So, good afternoon, panelists. Good afternoon, participants or good morning, good afternoon, good early in the morning, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. So, my name is Mutaleeb Ayodele, and I'll be talking about uh, democratizing spine surgery education and training in resource limited settings. Um, it's a privilege, from my perspective, to speak on this topic. This topic is both professionally important and personally very meaningful to me. Uh, as many of us know, access to spine care is not only a clinical problem, but also a problem with training. And when she was introducing me, she talked about me going to different places, and this is the reason because not too many people on the continent. I think orthopedics generally and some very complex orthopedics subspecialty. Not many people and not many faculty in Africa, and particularly sub-Saharan Africa, are available to train, the workforce, the manpower. Okay, so if we cannot train enough competent surgeons, that means we cannot close the treatment gap, for the teeming population in Africa. So today I will discuss how digital platforms, remote mentorship, and regional collaborations can transform how we see and train, these surgeons in different parts of Africa. So these are my objectives. I will focus on four key areas. The first will be to briefly highlight or describe the barriers to spine surgery, training in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. When I say low resource setting, I'm talking about mainly sub-Saharan Africa because that's what applies to us. And secondly, I'll discuss how digital platforms are reshaping surgical education. I would also explore remote mentorship and teleproctoring. It's a big issue in even in the United States now. A lot of people are talking about teleproctoring, which are becoming increasingly relevant and more so to Africa. And finally, I will emphasize the importance of regional collaboration, and that is the big one in the room. Regional collaboration. I'm very happy to see the beautiful faces. Thank you, Dr. Bez, for chasing me down the rabbit hole everywhere. This is amazing, and this is the way we should go to help a very huge population in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as research networks as a sustainable solution to this problem. This is where I'm from. I'm from Nigeria, right in the middle of the world. You can see it right there. We call it the giant of Africa. We have 36 states plus Ghana. Ghana is the 37th state of Nigeria. I hope there's no Ghanaian in the amongst the attendees because I'm sure I'll be in trouble. So if you look just about 2, 3 countries to the west of Nigeria, you see Ghana. So Ghana is the 37th, state of the 36 states in Nigeria. Hopefully we'll take Togo and Benin soon. Anyway, that's a joke, but I'm not joking about Ghana. All right, this is where I was born and raised, Lagos. Very beautiful. I thought we'd have a lot of people from the west on this webinar so they can get to see what Nigeria looks like. This is Lagos State. Very beautiful. All right, but where Kemi lives is actually much more beautiful than this. There's a lot of chaos in this part of Nigeria, but Abuja is much more. I believe Kemi will show a picture of Abuja. Anyway, I'll go on. This is where I trained, and this is also where Kemi trained, So I'm happy to say that. To the left is the university, is the first university in Nigeria, and to the right is the University College Hospital, where I trained as a doctor, and also proudly where Kemi trained. All right, this is my background, as you've said, but I'll leave that since you've talked about that. So now the burden of spinal disorder continues to rise globally, and we know that, particularly in low and middle income countries. However, there is a significant dearth of trained workforce to keep the pace with patient population. And in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the number of trained spine surgeons is extremely limited. We have less than 50 active spine surgeon in Nigeria for a population of over 200 million people. That is insane. And of these over 200 million people, I can tell you we have less than 2 people doing complex spine deformity. I don't know, but I'm not, I think I do close to 95% of the complex spine deformity. And unfortunately, I'm not even in Nigeria. So I have to go home almost every now and again, to decongest this list. I said that in red there, we have fewer than one spine surgeon per million population in many parts of sub-Saharan. This is crazy, and this cannot continue. We have to find a solution, and this is one of the reasons why a webinar like this is very, very relevant. So it creates a major training and access gap, for surgeons and for trainees. There is this traditional model of surgical training. We all know this, training is concentrated in very high volume tertiary center, like where I train, UCH Ibadan. You get face-to-face mentorship. You see the surgeon on a daily. They harass you. They send you an errand. They tell you to do this, they tell you to do that. You're in the OR with them. You're in the SOPD with them. This is how most of us trained, and this is how many people train in different parts of, in different parts of the world. But this geographic restriction is a big thing for us in sub-Saharan Africa. A lot of us want to travel and we can't even get visas. It is probably easier for Talisa to travel in West Africa than it is for me to travel to Kenya. I won't even get a visa to go to Kenya. And this is a shame. We need to find a solution to this. Top of that, again, is financial constraint. A lot of people don't have the financial wherewithal to undertake this journey. And again, we have limited case volume in certain subspecialty, and the reason is simple. If the ability to do the cases are not there, these patients will not come up. You find patients going to different parts of, Africa, like Egypt. A lot of Nigerian patients still go to Egypt, they go to South Africa, the wealthy ones come to the United States or the UK to have their surgeries done. And we have to find a way to keep the patients in Nigeria, sorry, in sub-Saharan Africa, to keep the money in sub-Saharan Africa, and to keep the training in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. These challenges would always necessitate an innovative and scalable educational model. And this is what this is all about. There are different digital platforms, and over the last decade, digital technology has fundamentally changed how we can deliver education, and we all know this. And thanks to Kemi, I believe Kemi will be doing a lot of work on this. In the last 7 years, Kemi has revolutionized training, and I give her. I mean, we don't give her as much credit as she deserves. She has changed, transformed medical surgical education significantly in Nigeria, and she deserves a lot of praises for this. A lot of people every weekend come on our platforms. She's championed this, and she's made it one of one of the things that everybody in Nigeria, there's hardly any surgical training in Nigeria that doesn't have access, to some form of surgical training or the other. She brings surgeons from different parts of the world to teach on this platform. So with relatively simple tools like video conferencing, cloud platforms, and online, repositories like the webinars, we can now deliver high quality teaching across continents, and importantly, this model is very, very cost effective. All right. It is very scalable. You can deploy it in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and it's very accessible too. All you need is an internet access, and you can be logged in. It allows us to move from a location-dependent model of training to a globally distributed model of training. The location model was what we were trained with. We can now move to a globally distributed model. All right, so the top one there is the webinar-based curriculum. This has emerged as a cornerstone of modern surgical education. It's a structured webinar curriculum, and this can include a weekly didactic lecture. This is what Kemi has championed. Case-based discussion. Last week, for instance, we had someone just posted a very bad, limb deformity, post-infective limb angular deformity around it. I'm like, okay, why can't we have a panel discussion on this? And we had that. A lot of people learned from it. The patient is going to be better. The patient has been moved to a center where she can have a good surgery done, and everybody is happy. Evidence-based review is something we should also look at. And one of the key advantages is the flexibility. Sessions can be recorded like this now. I hope we've started recording. If we haven't, sessions can be recorded and accessed asynchronously. So I can access it from wherever I am, even on the flight. I can listen to these. Most of our sessions, probably all of the sessions, our webinar sessions, were recorded. And if you have access, it's already on the cloud. If you want access, Kemi can send them to you. In our experience, this model has significantly improved knowledge dissemination, especially among resident and early career surgeons. I believe Kemi will do more justice to this. The concept of remote mentorship and teleproctoring is a huge one, and is one thing that people are talking about even in the United States now. So beyond teaching, we know mentorship is very critical in surgical training. Everybody needs a mentor. That mentor-mentee relationship is critical to your growth, it's critical to your development, and it's much more critical, to patient safety and good outcome. So remote mentorship allows experienced surgeons world over to guide the trainees across geographical boundaries rather, So, and this can include preoperative planning discussions. Every time I want to do a surgery, I share my x-rays, a patient with my mentors. All right, so this is what I want to do. What do you think? Oh, don't do it like this. Why don't you do it like this? I did it like this 5 years ago. This was my outcome. If you don't mind, I think you should do it like this. So you learn. Patients get better. All right. Intraoperative teleproctoring. This is a huge one. Every time I'm in an OR, if I get into trouble, I do this. It's more like my mentors holding me by the hands and helping me to make the incision. And I believe a lot of us have had similar experiences. And then post-operative case reviews. I do it for all my patients. I have CAM scanner. I record so I take pictures of everything that I do, pre-op, intra-op, everything. So a lot of time when you see me sharing stuff, pre-op is there, intra-op is there, and post-op, follow-up is there. This model not only enhances learning, but it also improves patient outcome significantly, by supporting clinical decision making. Um, Role of regional collaboration. I believe this is one big one. And like I said before we started, I'm very happy to see Dr. Makena. I've heard a lot about you. I'm happy to see you, not so physically, but virtually. It's much more like I'm seeing you. Now, while global collaboration is important, regional is actually much more important and very critical. Regional networks allow institutions to pool resources together, share expertise, and standardize our training. And examples abound. We can have regional spine workshops, which we've started in Nigeria. We can have multi-center registries. We have spine registries. We have arthroplasty registries. And we have arthroplasty registries, and we can have, collaborative fellowship programs, which we've also started in Nigeria. Kemi gets a lot of fellows from different corners of Nigeria. I still get a lot of fellows as well from different corners of the world. The last time, before I came to the United States, I got a fellow all the way from Turkey. I got another fellow all the way from Japan, all right, coming to join me in Nigeria to see what I do. We need this collaborative fellowship program, and this approach helps us to build local capacity, which is important and essential for sustainability. These are the examples I talked about. Uh, Again, another huge one, which I've been able to latch onto, is research as a tool for surgical training. It is often underutilized, and a lot of people just think research is all about churning out paper, but it's underutilized as a training tool in surgical education. We need to engage trainees in research, and this helps to develop critical thinking. It helps them and us to understand, evidence-based practice. It helps the trainees to develop their writing skills. And this also helps, multi-center collaboration. I'm doing a study on the upper extremity deformities, the radial club hand. Kemi is doing the same. Dr. McKenna is doing this. So we can pull resources together and we can see how these differ from one geographic location to another. And then we can build larger data sets and more diverse clinical, scenarios. Okay. Um, Surgical expedition. This is what most of us do. If we have not started doing it, Makena, please do a lot of surgical expeditions to Kenya, to Ethiopia, and I dare say to Nigeria. We need you. All right. I do surgical expedition every 6 weeks to Nigeria. Every 6 weeks. We have what we call a Stand Tall Africa initiative, where we have a lot of patients that cannot afford. I got a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, through Harvard Medical School. We go to Nigeria and we offer free surgery for the most part, and sometimes discounted surgery to very indigent patients that can't afford the cost of implants. And we offer them these surgeries at no cost, in most instances. And this enhances direct skills transfer to the residents and surgeons back home. It exposes them to newer techniques of doing things, and there's real-time mentorship there. Real time. This is how to do it, this is how not to do it. However, this should not function as an isolated intervention. They should be integrated, as far as I'm concerned, into a broader training, framework. Again, I think Kemi will talk about this. This is a summary of what I've talked about so far: remote mentorship and in-case training, surgical workshop, fellowship, and visiting faculty program. Again, we started this in Ibadan last year. I realized everywhere I visit in the West, you have visiting, faculty programs. We started the Professor O.O. Alonge Visiting Professorship Program in Ibadan. There's going to be an annual lecture. And I told the faculties, different parts of Nigeria should have the same thing, wherein you bring distinguished faculty from different corners of the world to give this lecture. It encourages students. Students see this, I'm like, oh, I want to be like this. So I want to be like Dr. Makena. I want to be like Dr. Olukemi Lawani. Students see this and they're encouraged, to want to be that kind of person. And this I think is the way to go. But then again, we have challenges. But I'm not gonna sit on these challenges. We know our challenges in Africa. We know the problems, but I always see solutions when I see problems. So I don't want to talk about this so as not to discourage us. I'm just putting there for completeness sake. But these are my take-home messages. Spine surgery training remains a limited, you know, model in many parts of resource challenge, areas of the world like sub-Saharan Africa. The gap in spine surgery training remains a global problem as well, not just in sub-Saharan Africa. Even in the United States, we have less than 1,000 spine deformity surgeons and probably less than 300 that are actively practicing. So digital platforms are helping to democratize access to this surgical education world over. Remote mentorship enables continuous learning and improves clinical outcomes for our patients. And this is more so important in sub-Saharan Africa. So regional collaboration and research are essential, for sustainable capacity building. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of phone calls, so I'm trying to cut the cord. That's why you see me moving up and about. And ultimately, we need a hybrid model. Hybrid model, that encompasses this digital innovation and hands-on training, for different corners of sub-Saharan Africa. I should be able to go in, do surgical expedition and train surgeons, train local capacity, while also encouraging them to latch on to access that they have in different corners of the world. Attend webinars, talk to mentors, get mentors to hold your hand to do these surgeries. I think this is the way to go. So I thank you all for listening to me, and these are my references. I hope I didn't shoot beyond the time limit I was allocated.
No, you did great, Dr. Shobode. Thank you very much. This has been really interesting, and it's going to continue to be a critical question to ponder on as well. I'm a very strong advocate to locally framed advanced training. It's also a great way of tailoring innovations to the situation that's happening to the continent, right? And we had a chat with Dr. Lawani a lot before this. Like we were talking about how there should be a way for people to have access to surgeons in the region and know who's doing what in the continent. And this is a very good introduction to that. So thank you so much. Um, do we have questions? So we don't have any. Yeah, we have questions from Deb. Uh, I'm going to read it. What are the important attributes of a
You don't you,
teleproctor?
you don't want us to leave the question and answer to the end, so
We
that
have
we can take.
5 minutes
Okay, good.
to address
I'll be
just
happy.
one or two. Yeah.
I'll be
And
happy to
then
take.
at the end as well. Yeah. So it says, what are the important attributes of a teleproctor? Someone who understands the type of work you do in terms of case mix or resource mix or both. How much time does a mentorship take per case or per week?
For me,
Yes. Yeah.
okay,
That would be.
so I can speak for myself right now. So if I'm in the OR or before I get into the OR, and I believe for virtually all, oops, okay, okay. So I thought I was wondering what happened there. So I think I already stopped sharing, right?
Yes. Yes. You
Okay.
could.
So before I get into the OR, I believe this is for all surgeons. That is a golden opportunity you have to train a resident. Uh, no lecture. As much as we believe, as much as webinars will give you the theoretical background to build your knowledge base, there is no lecture that can substitute for the personalized explanation and direct patient access. Now, I see it as a golden opportunity to hold the resident's hand and teach the resident how to do it. You're seeing the patient, you're seeing the real problem. See, I go to a lot of conferences, but I tell myself if I'm not in the OR with this guy, I'm not going to learn this. I've had to go to Taiwan, I've had to go to Pakistan. You don't want to know who taught me some spine surgery in Pakistan. I don't want to mention it because it's a global audience, but I've had to go search them out. But I mean, teleproctoring, you are with the surgeon. The surgeon, this is what the problem is like. This is what we're going to do. You have a model you work with in his office, and then you go to the OR. The surgeon tells you, this is what I do. A lot of the time, you will still learn on the job. A lot of things that it's not you don't get taught everything. However, you will still learn some things on the job. But teleproctoring ensures that you are with the man, you see him. I mean, a lot of us have this is we get starstruck. I mean, when I met some of these guys that I see in books, I mean, I was starstruck. I'm like, oh wow, so this is you. And I'm amazed the way they move in OR. You learn a lot from them. You learn their mannerism, their attitude. So it's not just surgery. You learn so much. You pick their bad, sorry, you pick their good attitude. you, you you take the good from Makena, the good from Kemi, the good from Bears, the good from Ekundayo, the good from everybody. And you drop the bad of Kemi, drop the bad of Makena. A lot of us, you end up still picking the bad of some of these guys. Maybe the way they talk, the way they move. But more importantly, teleproctoring and mentorship not only teaches you surgery, it teaches you the habit, the attitude, the practice, the mannerisms of these surgeons. And then you build on that.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Dr. Shobode. Our next speaker is Dr. Makena Mbogori. She's an orthopedic surgeon with a specialty in upper extremities, sports medicine, arthroscopy, and joint preservation. She's currently practicing in Alberta, Canada. Her clinical and research work focuses on shoulder and elbow surgery, surgical education, and technology-enhanced training, including the mentoring initiatives. Originally trained in Kenya, Dr. Mbogori brings a unique global perspective to surgical training and workforce development in Africa and beyond. She has published and presented internationally on topics related to upper extremity, surgical innovation, and global orthopedics. Dr. Mbogori is deeply passionate about advancing equitable surgical education and diversity in orthopedics. She serves on the Canadian Orthopaedic Association's Global Surgery Committee, and she also served her region as the representative for the International Orthopedic Diversity Alliance. Her contributions to research, leadership, and global surgery have been recognized with several honors, including the ISACO's Young Investigator Scholarship and the Canadian Orthopaedic Association's Leadership in Diversity Scholarship. So you may have known her as the previous African regional representative. It's very nice to have you here, Makena. You have already shared your screen, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Beza, and the entire IODA committee for inviting me to speak today. And this is quite an important conversation, and I'm glad that we're having this kind of conversation. So basically, if you think about it, if you take two surgical trainees, one in a high resource system and one in a resource, I want to use the word resource conscious. Because as Dr. Shobode also mentioned, we know what the limitations are, but then we should also start changing the narrative behind it. Is that because I can tell you there's no place in the world that has over capacity of resources. There's always a limitation here and there. So for us in resource conscious settings, there's an assumption that probably one of those trainees will be disadvantaged. But what I've learned training across a few countries that I'm going to go through, that the excellence in surgical education is not defined by resources alone. It's defined by how we adopt, how we collaborate, and how we learn from the patient that is in front of us. So today I'll share perspectives from my journey across different training systems and practical strategies to strengthen surgical education in resource-conscious environments by not waiting for a perfect system, but maximizing what we already have. So I started my journey I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, born and raised. I completed my undergraduate, or rather medical school at the University of Nairobi, followed by internship, which is mandatory clinical internship, and then proceeded on to my residency training again at the University of Nairobi, which is at the Kenyatta National Hospital, which is the main teaching and referral hospital in Kenya. That's about 5 years. I also undertook the COSEXA examination and became a fellow of the College of East Central and Southern Africa, and then transitioned into practice as a consultant orthopedic surgeon before making the move to Canada. So Along the way, at some point, I also did a 3-month fellowship in India, and I'm just going to use the experiences from all the different countries to kind of give my perspective. And as this journey has been shaped by a lot of differences, high clinical volumes and resource constraints, for example, which of course then led me to become adaptable, resourceful. And my residency training, one of those trainings that you got hands-on from day one because you're the one running the whole ward, running the hospital. Um, and then this lived experience has also informed my perspective on how we can rethink and strengthen surgical education moving forward. So I then sought some subspecialty training, and that's how I ended up coming to Canada. I've been able to pursue upper extremity and sports medicine fellowships in Dalhousie, which is in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and also in Edmonton, which is where I still am in Alberta. And certainly, there's stark differences between my training back home. There's a consistent access to infrastructure, advanced imaging, and a wide range of surgical resources, certainly allowing for a comprehensive learning experience. The training environment is also highly collaborative and multidisciplinary with strong mentorship, often through one-on-one preceptorship. A little bit less harassment, but I think harassment is part of surgical training anywhere in the world, but definitely more hands-on, one-on-one mentorship, which definitely makes a difference. Also, a strong emphasis on research and academic growth. Dr. Shobode also talked about the importance of research. I think in most residency training, it's part of the training or it's a requirement, but the support sometimes is not very strong. You don't get protected research time. The databases are not maybe available. You may be the one who has to do your own data collection, data analysis, and sometimes that can be quite stressful. So that has been one of the opportunities that I've been glad to kind of be exposed to by being here and kind of see how we can now change that to make it easier for research to be done back home. Also, there are well-defined professional networks and career pathways that support long-term development of trainees. That being said, while this is a resource-rich environment with many advantages, it's also important to recognize that every system has its own limitations, which is why context remains key when thinking about surgical education globally. As we have, talked about the different challenges and we know these challenges at heart, we have experienced them, whether it's from a human resource perspective. Dr. Shobode did already mention about the shortage of orthopedic surgeons, be it in spine surgery, sports, upper extremity, arthroplasty, and also not just the shortage of the subspecialties, even just from general orthopedic trauma care. There's burnout, difficult working condition, and ultimately brain drain can happen. Infrastructure can be challenging in terms of shortage of implants. Maybe sometimes unreliable electricity for sterilization. These both impact training and patient care. Some depending on the country, and I think in most places residency slots are sometimes few, and this is probably not only unique to Kenya or Africa itself. I think generally everywhere in the world, there's always a gap between the number of trainees needed and the number of training positions. We know all about the financing and even policy changes because challenges we have. Funding in some countries with healthcare is not a priority. Delayed salaries, and the high out-of-pocket costs for patients sometimes will affect how care is delivered. And then the system level changes, weak referral system, overcrowded tertiary centers, and lack of integrated patient records. And I think this is one of the main reasons why research is sometimes a little bit difficult because the patients, there's no one's maybe healthcare management systems. In some of the hospitals, we're still using paper charts. So trying to go through that to get information can be limiting. But the key point is that in all these challenges, they're interconnected. They're not only unique to Kenya, Africa. There are global similarities all over the world, and they are shared in the different regions, and which is why solutions need to be collaborative and context specific. So what would be an ideal surgical training? If ideal, and I put ideal in quotes because if that will ever exist, but it's about designing training that is relevant, adaptable, and patient-centered. So certainly, being able to, because often we assume that ideal means high resource, but in reality, ideal is not defined by how much you have, but how relevant it is. It should be aligned to the local disease burden, because training that doesn't reflect the patients you actually see doesn't translate into good care. Must be patient-centered. That is the core of what we do every day. Should be collaborative, like we are doing right now, locally, regionally, and globally. And it should be resource conscious, training surgeons to work effectively within realities of the environment and not idealized conditions. It should encourage innovation, maybe because many of the best solutions come from constraint. And finally, it should build advocacy, because as surgeons, we're not just clinicians, we are the voices of our patients and our healthcare system. So an ideal training is not necessarily about perfection. It's about relevance, adaptability, and the impact that we make. So this is one of my favorite sayings: think global, act local. We can learn from systems all over the world, best practices, innovations, and new technologies, but ultimately what matters is how we apply this knowledge in our own context. The best teacher, and as Dr. Shobode had also mentioned, is not in a conference, it's not in a textbook, it's not in a pub, it's the most recent publication. It's the patient right in front of you. And this patient exists within a specific healthcare system with specific limitations, resources, and needs. That's why when we talk about improving surgical education, we have to move away from the idea of a perfect system, because this actually doesn't exist. Instead, the goal is to take what we have, understand it deeply, and then use it as effectively as possible. Once we understand the realities of our system, then the next step is, how do we maximize what we already have? One of the most powerful training tools is actually the environment that you're already in. Whatever training program that you're in, whatever job position that you're in, maximizing that on a day-to-day basis. Daily ward runs are not just a service, they're teaching opportunities. The operating room is where real hands-on learning happens, and clinics is where you develop that critical decision-making and clinical judgment. So regardless of where you're training, it's important to be intentional about making the most of every interaction, every day, every patient. Residency and fellowships are incredibly valuable, but that's just the beginning. Learning does not end there. As I completed my residency and my fellowships, I always think, oh, now I'm done. And you realize, no, you're not done. You're just getting started. And the ability to continuously learn, adapt, and grow within your environment is what defines a strong surgeon. Beyond immediate training within the facility that you're currently working or training in, regional and local learning platforms are important. And nowadays, it's quite easy. The world has become one. Basically, with your phone, you can connect with anyone around the world. So things like grand rounds, departmental teachings, which are often accessible either in person or online, extends to as well scientific conferences and meetings, such as the ones organized by the Kenya Orthopaedic Association, KASEXA, West Africa College of Surgeons, provides opportunities not just to learn, but also to engage with peers facing similar challenges. Workshops and fellowships within the region are also incredibly valuable for when available, and they offer context-relevant hands-on training. Webinars like this ones and the ones that are maybe held every week help bridging the gaps in access, making education more available. But beyond the content itself, what these spaces offer is connection, networking, collaboration, and innovation, which is, we've talked about how important that is. And in many ways, these regional ecosystems of learning are key in strengthening the education in a sustainable and context-specific way. Certainly, while local and regional platforms are essential, international exposure also plays a role. We have conferences and meetings such as CICOT and ISACOS that provide access to global expertise, new techniques, and evolving practices, and opportunities to engage with a much wider surgical community. A lot of these meetings also have scholarships and sponsorships available, many specifically aimed at supporting surgeons from low and middle income countries, and can significantly reduce the barriers of accessing these spaces. And I think it's important to be able to take some of these opportunities. I've actually been privy to sit on the back end of sifting through some of these applications of some of these scholarships, and you actually realize very few people apply. And when I talk to people, it's almost like you feel, or some people don't associate with that. Those are for other people. These scholarships and sponsorships are for you. If you are interested in this, is something you're interested in. Sometimes just making an application, you may be the only one or one of few, and your chances of getting that scholarship or sponsorship is quite high. So I encourage everyone to take some of these opportunities. Certainly international fellowships, like the ones I've myself, Beza, and maybe Dr. Shobode have been able to do. They're available. Of course, that means you have to travel, you have to leave home. There are cost implications to it, but the whole idea is to be able to go back home, which is the goal, and give back this information, give back this knowledge to and strengthen the practice back in Kenya, in Africa. Social media and open access learning. I mean, one of the biggest shifts in surgical education today is the rise of social media and open access learning. We are no longer limited to what's available within our institutions. Platforms like Orthobullets provide structured, high-yield knowledge. I mean, YouTube, I call it University of YouTube. You can literally get a whole degree just by watching YouTube. Is basically powerful for visual learning. WhatsApp groups are also available. These ones allow real-time case discussion, shared experiences. There are so many people who post a case just before going into the OR, and they get quite some good insights. Instagram, LinkedIn, you can basically go through a whole case presentation there. People are always posting. There are global platforms there, like the Global Elbow Network has Gen Connect. You can put your cases up there. You can ask for advice. There's really good discussion with everyone from around the world. You get a very good perspective because every kind of region is different, and you'll always find someone within that region who has had that experience with a patient like you have, and are able to give you quite good advice. So I think we should continue to take advantage of all these platforms. We've talked about telementorship. Dr. Shobode, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as we look to the future, technology and innovation are playing an increasing role. Virtual preceptorship, I mean, with virtual reality, mixed reality, we are seeing that you're able to learn from experts around the world. I happen to be involved in a research project with about this remote mentorship and remote proctorship. So you basically have you have someone or your mentor in the OR with you, even though they're across the world. I mean, I think that's like, next generation kind of learning. They're able to take you through the case step by step because you're using these goggles or these glasses. They're able to see what you see. They're able to draw within the virtual space, and you're able to basically even learn how to make, go step by step with the case. Then we have companies like Precision OS that are actually putting in simulations into these VR goggles, so that you can be able to go through a case start to finish, when you're before you even get into the OR. And of course, that increases your haptic feedback, it increases your skill level, and by the time you're getting into the case, you're very well prepared. So it's important to acknowledge that some of these technologies certainly come with cost implications, but if we shift the mindset rather at looking at them as expenses, we look at them as investments in training, capacity building, and which will ultimately improve patient outcomes. We have a lot of programs that are available on the continent. AO, I think, is one of them, AO Alliance. These provide structured hands-on teaching. Steps to Walk is a foot and ankle subspecialty training, visiting surgeons that go around the world. And they usually, it's a whole week from patient reviews, clinical examination, and then surgeries. So for that week, I remember participating in a few of them in Nairobi. You're basically learning as much as you can in 1 week from all the leaders around the world. And these tend to really improve and just get you to the next level when it comes to subspecialty training. And so we should always keep trying to take advantage of these. So finally, I'll talk about research and how collaborative research is very important. Local research leads to local solutions. What works in one setting will not always translate to another. And that's why regional collaboration is very important, as Dr. Shobode has also mentioned. At the same time, there's value in presenting some of this work globally, not only to share knowledge, but to ensure that perspectives from our region are represented in the wider surgical community. It's important There are increasing opportunities for research support, including research grants from organizations like ISACOS that help to bridge some of these gaps, not only in funding, but in mentorship as well. And certainly research is not only about how many publications that you have, it's about informing practice, improving patient outcomes, and strengthening the systems that we work in. And when we approach this collaboratively, it becomes a powerful tool for change. So in conclusion, certainly, there's no perfect training system. There's a powerful opportunity right now to rethink how we train, how we collaborate, and how we innovate. I'm glad that I'm part of this discussion right now, not by waiting for more resources or more ideal conditions, but for fully leveraging what we already have. If we remain resourceful, if we stay connected across regions, and if we continue to learn from each other and from the patients that we serve while keeping the patient at the center of everything, then surgical education in Africa and globally will not just improve, it will evolve, it will influence, and ultimately it will lead. Thank you very much. I'm open for any questions or comments.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Makena. And I think I picked up on two very important things from your talk, especially about urban concentration of surgeons and also adaptable training, which is a very interesting area for me because we need to start talking about how a surgeon from, say, Nairobi or Addis with the expertise of 10 plus years can hop on a call with a trainee or a new surgeon all the way in a rural area and share their expertise. And this is also on par with the teleproctoring Dr. Shobode was also mentioning. And I know, Makena, you've been part of a consistent telementoring and broadcasting of specific surgical procedures here in Canada. And I realize that's a very great way of streamlining skills transfer and skills training. So I think it's about time we start discussing about utilizing the surgeons we already have inside the country or across the region and make the best of everyone's expertise. And thank you so much for being part of this discussion. I think our third speaker, Dr. Godfrey, might be running into some trouble, and I don't think he'll be able to join us right now. So while we're waiting for him, we'll go for our other speaker, Dr. Olukemi Lawani. She's an orthopedic surgeon based in Nigeria. She completed her medical degree from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria and proceeded to attend a fellowship in pediatrics orthopedic surgery at the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow. She's currently working as a consultant pediatrics orthopedic surgeon at Cedar Crest Hospital in Abuja, Nigeria. Dr. Lawani serves as a faculty for residence teaching program in trauma and orthopedics through the Nigerian Orthopedics Association and the AO Alliance, which she was also a fellow of in 2016. She's a passionate advocate for vulnerable children, and she volunteers at several charity organizations to bring specialty care to children. Dr. Lawani received multiple awards, including the State Coordinators Award in 2008, the Orthopedic Trauma Association's Emerging Global Leaders Women's Fellowship Scholarship in 2024, and the Nigerian Orthopedic Association's Appreciation Award in 2025. We're very happy to have you here, Dr. Lawani. You have already shared your screen. Please go on.
Yes, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here. I bring you greetings from Nigeria. I thank Dr. Tsegaye for this invite. I still look forward to you visiting us. And I thank my teachers, as always. I'm so pleased that Deborah Eastwood is here. I feel like she's my grandmother in this profession, having learned from people who learned from her. And I thank my team as well. This is some of the sorts of work that we do in West Africa. And to jump right into it, I think that the terrain of surgical practice in Africa is changing. We're having our patients with increased awareness, increased expectation, and across-board litigation is rising as well. We're having more funding because now we have more insured persons. We have foreign returns for regional care, being people who used to live abroad who have then returned, or people who still live abroad and who have come back home to have care because it's often faster for them. And we're also getting more people who are sending home money for the care of their loved ones. Information availability is at an all-time high, and this includes information in terms of online, in terms of, the return of foreign trained surgeons as well, which in Nigeria we refer to as JAPADA, which is essentially reverse brain drain. And now we have equipment, to do all sorts of things. And I believe we have bridge that gap between Western and African orthopedic care. However, we do have to continue to maintain this bridge. In my opinion, surgical education remains the bridge and the way to continue to maintain access to excellent care for our people. We have to maintain standards. We have to ensure that the practice of surgery and orthopedics continues to be safe, and we must shorten the learning curve for the new surgeon to prevent them from burning out. We must continue to mentor our people, and these are all the things that would help us to have a sustainable practice. I was privileged last year to mentor some girls from Ethiopia, and it was as much a blessing for themselves as it was for myself as well. I believe that education remains the highest form of learning for us as trainers, and we must not stop this in any sense. But there are challenges which I will dwell on a little bit. I mean, Nigerian, we like to gripe a little bit before preferring solutions. And some of these are as stated here. I will go into a few of these problems with a bid to trying to discuss towards the end of the talk some of the ways in which we have managed to circumvent them. So to talk on remuneration for a little bit, it's a sticky topic. Traditionally, the reward of the doctor is in heaven, as medicine was traditionally regarded as something charitable. But in reality, we have wages that are not matching the inflation rates that we have across the world, and we have wages that are not reflecting the cost of care to payers. So we have a mismatch on both sides of the divide, and we continue to need to fund surgical education, and this is expensive. People have tried doing things like performance-based care so that remuneration is fairer for surgeons, but there have been opportunities for abuse in this sort of system. And again, this has not specifically catered to the cost of education or the cost of teaching to the teachers or learners as well. The trouble is that teaching and learning are what have often been sacrificed in a bid to try to provide surgical care that is, efficient, maximizes time, and, maximizes profits, particularly in the private sector, or just maximizes resources in the public sector. Motivation is something I want to dwell on a little bit. And we find that many of the people who actually commit to surgery as a lifelong practice do not do it for money. However, what motivates one person or the other is very intensely personal. And there are all sorts of non-monetary benefits that can accrue to teaching and accrue to the practice of surgery. However, we find that job security for a surgeon, in particularly, job security for an academic surgeon in our own time is becoming quite nuanced. And a lot of the so-called other benefits, monetary or otherwise, are all becoming very difficult to compute and to track. We also have a new kind of surgeon to train. We have the Gen Z surgeon, and in time we will have Gen Alpha surgeons and Gen Beta surgeons as well to think about. But this is the perspective of an older millennial, and I'll just dwell a little bit on some of the characteristics of the Gen Zs to help us have a bit of perspective over what the expectation is from the perspective of the trainees that we now have. They want collaboration, they want to be included, they want flexible working, they need work-life balance. And there's a lot more awareness now about mental health issues. There's the need for understanding and fairness, which sometimes comes across in a very autocratic profession as being challenging of authority. And of course, they want financial independence because across the block, the Gen Z surgeon can see Instagram, influencers who are making a lot of money for doing way less work than what he or she has to put in. And there's generally a short attention span these days, which in some ways might be good, but sometimes is detrimental to training and practice. But we still have an old problem because surgical disease has remained quite static. We still need to teach how to do a knee replacement in a specific kind of way. We have our resource restrictions, we have patients who are more aware, we have all of that with longer training periods and a fairly difficult academic terrain. However, I believe that our solutions continue to be simple. We must collaborate more and we must focus continually on the conduct of surgery, continually on the excellent conduct of orthopedics as a specialty. And I'll talk a bit of some solutions and some of the things that we have tried from this list. I believe that exchange programs should be mandatory for fellowship training because we must maximize the benefits of learning from as many people as possible at a time when, as a trainee, you have the flexibility to do this. We must maximize online platforms, and there are specialist groups with residents access across board these days. Online teaching modules can be useful to even out our knowledge gaps. And more, the colleges, for instance, the West Africa College of Surgeons and the National Postgraduate Medical College here in Nigeria, are focusing on a competency-based curriculum to ensure that we have trainees who know what they need to know in reality rather than just abstractly. We must begin to recognize different types of learners and tailor teachings to their strengths, including the strengths of people who want to work flexibly and have work-life balance and all of that. And there must be increased sensitivity that people are different and not all disabilities are visible. I'll talk a bit about some of the things that we have done, and I'll start with the Nigerian Orthopaedic Association Zoom learning platform. This is in its 6th year running. I'm privileged to have contributed to the curriculum that we used for this, and it was driven by the observation of the variability in the knowledge base of different residents across board, and the aim was to teach a reasonable orthopedic curriculum each cycle. Each cycle lasts about 1 to 1.5 years. And right now, we still continue to have about 100 attendees each week, possibly more. And for the trainers, we have had some non-monetary benefits, which have included, teaching prestige. You've come as an expert on your own subject matter, and it's become a useful networking avenue, a case for you to showcase your caseload and the sorts of things that you do, which provides, again, prestige and then sometimes referrals with people knowing where to send patients to. The keys to the success of this program have been entrenched in deep political will. We have had complete support from the leadership of the Nigerian Orthopaedic Association, and we have had a program that has continued to be useful to surgeons across generations. The older ones come to give advice, the younger ones come to learn and see how best to manage cases in a manner that is relevant, state of the art, and we have continued to provide current information across different subspecialties in orthopedics and different topics from this. We also have the Nigerian Orthopaedic Association Traveling Fellowships. This is in its 3rd year running. I must thank and commend Professor Esson, who I'm not sure he's on this call, but he has provided very excellent leadership for the education committee for this, and I'm a member of that committee as well. We have this starting. This started in Nigeria as a drive to try to put subspecialty training within the country because it became way too expensive to have young fellows leave the country and go abroad to have subspecialty training like we were opportune to do. It still runs a fairly traditional model of training, and we have had funding that has been partly from the Nigerian Orthopaedic Association and partly from the host hospitals. Again, in fairness to the success of this program, we must commend the fact that we've had very good support from the leadership of the association, and it has been something that provides, good, high-quality trained hands to render service in the host hospitals, and that gives them very clear benefits. And for the participants, we've had a poll that showed that most of our participants were between 6 and 10 years following their diplomas in orthopedics, and they have been able to say that they were able to get a good spread of cases, they were able to get good hands-on training, and the overall report of the experience with the program has been quite positive. We've also had WhatsApp subspecialty groups as well in the country, and some of the more prominent ones have been the Spine Society of Nigeria, the Limb Lengthening and Reconstruction Society of Nigeria, and there's a global hand surgery group that cuts across different countries, of which, many persons in Africa are also members. For these subspecialty groups, they have provided visibility for subspecialties, and this has been a useful pathway to introduce new fellows to a subspecialty and then to the persons practicing that subspecialty for the purposes of recruitment. We also have had an aggregation of minds with a huge pool of experience on these sorts of platforms, and they've all gradually become referral platforms, second opinion platforms, and even some of them have gone on to become formal collectives, such as the Spine Society, which has been formally registered and inaugurated as that, the Limb Recon Society, and the Arthroplasty Society, and so forth. May I be so bold at this time to propose that we can have at least an e-platform for East-West collaboration using orthopedics as a trial in Africa. I believe that we can start with an online forum, of which this excellent meeting is one, and this would very rapidly, very easily develop into traveling fellowships and into collaboration so that we can continue to look after our people, whether they're economically disadvantaged or not, whether they're vulnerable because of reasons of gender, because of reasons of tribe, or of location, for lots and lots of people who cannot come to the big cities to get care. They must have a trained surgeon go to their communities to look after them. And of course, even for us as surgeons and clients, these are reasonable avenues for us to start thinking of looking after people with less visible disabilities, whether they're surgeons or clients, and of course, to work towards training a new generation with a fairly different mindset from that we had when we were in more traditional training. Thank you very much for your time. I think this has been a small summary of talks, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kemi. Again, I would like to remind our participants to feel free to write your questions on the chat box or raise your hand and ask them yourself. So this would be the time for our Q&A session. So we're happy to take all your questions. Thank you so much, Kemi. I think I have a question for you because I do feel strongly about the regional exchange programs and sharing the local expertise that we already have. And we need to start thinking, where in Africa could I get this training before we start thinking, where in the world can I get this training, right? Especially for those advanced education. But we also understand that there is a huge gap of awareness and knowing who is doing what in the region, right? We don't know what Kemi is doing in Nigeria. Most people are not aware of what Dr. Mbogori might be doing in Kenya or what Dr. Shobode might be doing in Nigeria as well. So where do you think we should start in creating that platform and making everyone aware of all the expertise that we have in the sub-Saharan Africa? You're muted, Kemi. Oh, there you go.
Thank you very much for a wonderful and very difficult question, Bez. That's a tall one because we understand our constraints, but however, the whole purpose of this meeting is us looking beyond constraints and understanding that 2-3 people are a lot. I remember when we started off the NOA Zoom learning session, it was during COVID, and Dr. Shobode and myself had a chat and said, yeah, let's do this. And that was just it. Of course, the bulk of the work of the actual writing of the curriculum, looking for speakers and all of that fell on a few heads, but it's gone beyond us. And now, years down the line, there's so much more ownership of this from lots and lots of other people. In fact, we come now as spectators sometimes for the meetings, except when we have to chair it as panelists and so forth. So I believe that with this sort of problem, it would be something similar. I have met you, and I was so glad, we had our time spent while we were both on fellowship in Phoenix last year. Now we have Dr. Makena here, we have Dr. Shobode here, and he's got such wonderful passion for surgical education. He's constantly pushing me to do more, We already have everything that we need. We've got someone from the east of Africa, someone from, the Horn of Africa, someone from the west of Africa. I believe this is the start, and it's just to have these continued conversations and to continually introduce more and more people to these sort of things. I think it would take a lot of work from the few people who are present here to say we want to chat that, because the responsibility will fall on us as being the persons in our own local terrain to say, who do we have in Nigeria, which is some of what we started with when we did the NOA platform. We looked at who was in practice, who could teach what, who would be amenable to, the sort of thing that we were trying to do. And of course, we have to be politically sensitive. There are people who may not ever teach a lecture for you, but they are key opinion leaders. They're persons who have a lot of influence across generations or in specific generations. And those are the sort of things that I think we should have a meeting to think about. Who do we need? The one person in East Africa, the one person in West Africa, the one person in South Africa for the political will. And then what do we want to achieve with this platform? Do we want to teach a curriculum, in which case we have to draw up that curriculum? Do we want to just have like a meeting where people can post cases? Do we want it to be a mentorship platform such as the one that we worked on with the Ethiopians, with yourself being included as well last year? So we have the aim of the meeting next. And then the third thing would be to then find specific surgeons who would be available, amenable, and interested, because this is not work that pays you anything. Your motivation to do this is just to say, I want, in my opinion, or in my own subspecialty, I want any child who shows up to an orthopedic surgeon with something that a child could have to receive safe advice, and that safe advice could be, oh, go ahead and do this. It could be, go ahead and refer, whatever that happens to be in terms of the state of things. So that's my opinion in terms of how I think this would work out. I think it can be broken into those 3 steps, and I believe it is doable. Thank you for letting me talk for such a long time. I'm quite passionate on this topic.
We're so happy you get to share your passion with us. Deb had a comment on the chat box saying, not exactly a question, but I totally agree. Short exchange fellowships are great opportunities to see and learn, particularly if you go with a specific question that you would like answered. And I completely agree with Deb as well. I also had one question for Makena. So in terms of the telementoring and broadcasting initiatives that we just discussed about, what do you think are the setbacks that we need to overcome or start working on before embarking on this practical and very useful initiative in our region? Because I believe, apart from the entire resource limitation, which we believe is not going to be a problem if we start thinking those as an opportunity and an investment instead of an expense, right? But in terms of bringing people together and starting this program, what do you think should be done first?
So I think
Makena.
number one, it starts with yourself, right? So if, for example, which I do, have an interest to further surgical education, so I make the decision that I want to start this. And this also kind of goes to answer Deb's initial question about some of the characteristics of a good teleprompter. Number one, it starts with you. Are you interested and are you available to give your time to do that? Once you've established that it starts with you and you're able to do it, then is to figure out how and when. And I think simple is always best. For example, with the program or the research that I've been able to assist with, it's only one surgical procedure that would be telementored. So say you're an expert or you're experienced in doing one specific procedure that is a new one or something that is well needed, it can just start with one. It doesn't have to be all your cases, but just one case. And then you get maybe now the equipment or the resources. And it does not necessarily have to, it can start with just one camera somewhere, of course. Respecting the infectious disease restrictions that we have in the OR, but it's possible. Nowadays, there's even meta glasses, for example. You have your meta glasses on, you're able to see, and whoever you're broadcasting to is able to see exactly what you're saying, and you're able to go through the case step by step, right? It can start as simple as that and move with maybe some audio and some video, and you're kind of good to go. And then you have the mentor on the other side who's also willing and able to take that time and sit there down for X number of hours or minutes to be able to learn that case. And then the opposite then happens is you do the case, the person who was learning does the case as with the wearing the glasses or having the camera, and then the mentor on the other side seated watching them do the case, right? So it requires a lot of time commitment as well, and not all the cases, because at the end of the day, that's a patient and anesthetic. So, it has to be within a certain time limit. So all that takes a while to set up. I mean, we have to be realistic and honest here, but it is possible, and technology is only getting better, and this process can only get easier and easier over time. But it has to start with you as individual being good at what you do, being able and available to teach it, having whatever technology that you need within the room. The team around also has to be aware. You need to get the nurses on board, the anesthetist, the hospital administration. So, because of both patient information sharing is also quite sensitive, and the hospital has to be on board. But certainly, I feel like with any initiative like this, most people are okay and will be on board as long as you involve them in the process and explain to them what we're doing, right? And once that happens, then you set it up, and then you just keep doing that same one thing over and over again. It's not all the cases in the day. Typically, it would be one case, the one at the beginning, so you give yourself a little bit of time, and then the rest of the cases continue on as normal. And that one a day, 2 or 3 times a week, translates to 50 or 60 at the end of the year, right? And then as well, being available for the cross proctorship, right? So like in the project that we're doing is the procedure is being done by the trainee either in a cadaveric lab or on a live patient, and you're able to guide them through the steps, and they self-assess, and you also assess them as the mentor. And finally, industry collaboration. If you're able to get the implant companies to support this process, that is, I think, a lot of the how they're able, the technologies and the resource, the devices are procured because of some support from the implant companies. Certainly, that can also get political, and you have to be sensitive about it and do it ethically, but it is possible because implant companies also have a mandate to continue surgical education within most of their objectives. That's one of it. Certainly, they have their own economic interests as well, but somehow there has to be a middle ground between how that is achieved. So speaking to the implant reps, they can help to support some of these endeavors. So it's possible. It starts by, okay, is this possible? Can I do it? You have to see it in your mind, believe it that it's possible, and then you can be able to execute. So I think that's where now the next step is. Having experienced this, it's possible. Now we can be able to execute all these processes.
Perfect. This is actually a very good breakdown of what happens in the theater during these telementorings. And of course, it might come off as a bit of an expensive initiative, but we have seen this being done with 3, 4 cell phone cameras, and that was all. So you don't, well, at least to start with, we would need a lot of equipment and all of the resource intensive things. So thank you so very much. I don't see any additional questions from our participants or, yeah, on the chat box. So if our speakers, if you have any other points that you would like to mention at the closing remark, and I would also like to echo what Dr. Shobode was saying about the visiting faculty missions. And it's a very untapped opportunity in our continent. And I've been part of multiple surgical campaigns myself in Africa and in my country as well. And it's a very great way of pulling resources, human resources, and actually material resources from one part of the continent to another. And it's also a great opportunity to teach trainees, surgeons, and the whole entire theater staff. So this is a very great initiative that we need to embark on. If anyone has any closing remarks that you'd like to say.
So rising from this meeting, we can chase down those low-hanging fruits. I'm thinking more of research groups. I mean, I don't know when we're gonna have this meeting again. I know we have a good mix of surgeons from. I just eyeballed the list of the attendees, and I can see a good mix of surgeons from the east and western part of Africa. I think we should chase down those low-hanging fruits now. I don't know how you plan to do it, and I think your work with Kemi. I know Dr. Makena is big on research. I know Kemi is big on research as well. My friend in Canada has told me a lot about Makena, like I said, how she's been hounding him to make sure he does one research or another. So I'm pleading on his behalf to reconsider, helping him, to get those research, papers out as soon as possible. So let's look at those low-hanging fruits and how we can make them come to fruition. Again, like I said, there are so many people in that room that are looking forward to seeing what we can make out of this meeting. Visiting faculty. I think every hospital in the sub-region, be it a tertiary referral center or a university hospital, we should have this visiting faculty, program yearly, twice yearly. You bring in, surgeons from different parts of the world to come give a lecture on a specific area of interest. All right. That way you will end up motivating the students, motivating the residents. Residents get to meet you, they get to see what you do. I do a lot of on-site proctoring and less of teleproctoring. For me, it's mostly on-site proctoring. If I'm going to do teleproctoring, I don't use technology. I don't have that much technology available in Nigeria. I mean, a case in point, I was on a case in Nigeria, and I know you call us Generator Republic. You don't want to say it, but we know what you guys call us in Nigeria. But I was in the OR, and there was power cut, and the surgeon from America was like, "What is going on? Are you okay? Are you safe?" I'm like, "Never mind, I'm fine. I'm okay." But things like this happen. So I don't do much of teleproctoring. My teleproctoring happens mostly pre-op and just shortly after I start the surgery, but not when I'm instrumenting and all that. If you have the technology, yes, but very, very few places in Africa have that ability to use technologies, to use machine, like Dr. Makena, displayed when she was making her deposition. So we don't have this much, but if you can do on-site proctoring, maybe not for trauma, but for cold cases, for elective cases, yes, I think that works. I'm very interested in the concept of Gen Z surgeon, because apparently that's not something anybody is paying attention to, but this is something we're going to be faced with in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We're actually seeing surgeons, that are exhibiting this, attitude and characteristics of Gen Zs right now. If I may ask, Kemi, how do you deal with surgeons like this? Because everything you presented, I just saw my daughters in that mode. These are my daughters. And when I get home and I want to talk to them, they just tell me, "Daddy, whatever. Daddy, what?" I don't push it. I know who they are. They think I'm too old. They think I don't understand anything. They think they know more than I do. So how do you deal with them, Kemi?
Well, I'll just share some actual experiences that I've had with teaching and training recently, and well, see what actually happened. So I started off training fellows before I started off training residents, which I know is a bit roundabout. And then I went to medical students after that. So I'm trying to go to medical students after that. And it was very quick to see that difference in generations, between my fellows who are mostly in their 40s, people who are coming because they want to learn this subspecialty and they have trained in a more traditional way, and then having trainees who are fourth year, fifth year, who just send you a text message in the morning to say, "Sorry, I can't come. I had a flat tire." Or they don't even send a text message. They send their colleague a text message to give you a response. But this is what I have learned from working with them. I believe that they still want leadership. And for anybody who has shown up for a surgical specialty, we have to assume that the baseline is that this person wants to become a good or at least a safe surgeon. And this has been my starting point with them. I learned this from my own boss as well, who is a seasoned trainer and clinician, when I had this sort of problem. And he said, "Sit down and have a conversation." And we did. focusing on being collaborative and being inclusive to say, I think you're smart enough to do this job, but these are the things I'm noticing about you, which I do not know if anybody else has noticed or brought up, which I think will make it difficult for you to be good or even great at this job. And in the occasions when I've had to have this conversation, interesting things have come up. The way we structure this in my hospital is to have like a performance-based review. You're normally supposed to have one at around the 6-month mark. You can have one a bit earlier than that if you think you're struggling, almost like a probation type, of review. And it was in the setting of this that we're able to have that sort of conversation to say, you score yourself and tell me how well you think you're doing. I score you and I tell you how well I think you're doing. And then we sit and have a meet in the middle to say, what's different? I see you this way, you see yourself this way, what's the problem? And sometimes we have come upon interesting things. With one personal assistant, we found out that he had serious problems with his eyesight and just needed to get glasses. And we then started dictating instructions to him as well because he really couldn't read. So maybe he was a bit dyslexic as well. He thought it was all just glaucoma. But we solved the problem once we switched to audio, based instructions rather than written. With other, trainees, it's been having a conversation and them saying, look, this is where I'm struggling. Okay, this is what we can do to help you. For one of my fellows, I found out that he preferred to have the information sent to him visually ahead of an operation. So I would send him a video to watch with the specific operative steps that I needed him to focus on. And he became absolutely brilliant after that. So it's looking to see what is the problem, to use that term, and then to see what can we both do to come across. And of course, you will have people who are really not interested in surgery, or, maybe they've just, for whatever reason it is, you can't reach or engage with them. And in that case, the next step would be to speak with the head of department to say, I have this trainee, I can no longer continue with this person. Sometimes that is enough to jumpstart somebody who is still, someone you can still save. And for the people who you cannot save, it might be a good chance to have the conversation to say, you do not have to do surgery if you hate it so much. We can help you transition into some other subspecialty like radiology, pathology, whatever it is, that will make you happy, pay you way more money in some occasions, and then help all of us to continue to provide safe service to our patients. These are my thoughts on these issues practically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's quite an experience, Kemi.
Thanks,
I was
Kemi. Sorry, Beza, to kind of jump in a little bit, and just because I remembered a point that we talked about, figuring out who is doing what at what within the region. And I just remember that within IODA, there's actually a database, or once you register as a member of IODA, all that information is there of where you're practicing, what subspecialty you're doing, and what kind of your interests are. And I think we can take advantage of that database and give access to members for those who are looking for surgeons or fellowship opportunities. So I think it's within our interest to keep updating the database with our details so that, and if someone wants to access you through the regional representative, can contact you and you can be able to connect people, or through that database, someone is a member can have access to see where other members are. So I just wanted to kind of mention that before I forget.
No, absolutely. I think we're going to have to start working on updating that list with Talisa. It's just going to be a very important list. Really good point to mention, Makena. Thank you so much.
Sorry, if the link is available, are you able to share the link?
Yeah,
If it's, I mean,
absolutely.
there are folks that won't mind joining.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll share the link as soon as we have updated it. I was hoping to have Deb come up online and share a few words if she's around. Talisa? Oh, there.
Yeah.
Hi, Deb.
Yes. Thanks, Beth. Fantastic session. And I love the sort of phrases that you've all used about resource appropriate rather than resource constrained, and I've learned a lot about how I could deal with our trainees. Sorry, we're supposed to call them residents now, or how deal with our residents in a more appropriate manner. We think that we're good at online learning and WhatsApp teaching and the modern technology, but I don't think we are at all. We're using it, but not in as focused a manner as some of the initiatives you've been talking about. So I think we've got a lot to learn there. So that's fantastic. And yeah, I think the point you've just made about using the IODA database, because I think Bez is right, we need to update that a little bit. But there are plenty of people there. We've called it a speaker list, but I think we could also say there'd be a short exchange fellowship list, just people to be in contact with, mentorship, whatever we want to call it. But I think we're in danger of having too many different platforms, the speaker list, the mentorship list, the this, that, and the other list, where we just want to get in touch with people, and take it from there. And some of these things can be a bit more informal. So no, great session. Thanks a lot. I've learned lots. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Deb. If anyone has any more questions, I'll be happy to mention them. Otherwise, this should be the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for our panelists. Thank you to Lisa for helping us organize everything. Thank you, our members and participants. This has been a great morning for me, and hopefully great afternoon or great evening for everyone else. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Beza, for great meeting. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.